Mr. President, today I'd like to begin with a few quotations. Quote, "The legislative filibuster is the most important distinction between the Senate and the House. Without the 60-vote threshold for legislation, the Senate becomes a majoritarian institution, just like the House, much more subject to the winds of short-term electoral change. No senator would like to see that happen. So let's find a way to further protect the 60-vote rule for legislation." That was the current Democratic leader, Senator Schumer, in April of 2017, less than 4 years ago. Here's another quote, Mr. President. "What about the nuclear option, doing away with the filibuster? I can tell you that would be the end of the Senate as it was originally devised and created, going back to our founding fathers. We have to acknowledge our respect for the minority, and that is what the Senate tries to do in its composition and in its procedure," end quote. That was the Assistant Democratic leader, Senator Durbin, in 2018, about 3 years ago. A few years ago, 33 members of the Senate side signed a letter insisting that, quote, "we preserve existing rules, practices, and traditions regarding legislation." Now, under pressure from the outside, many of our Democratic colleagues are abandoning their stated principles as fast as possible. Yesterday, Senator Durbin said the filibuster is not a core principle, but, quote, "an offhanded clerical suggestion." An offhanded clerical suggestion. And a number of Senate Democrats are trying to pressure the senior senators from West Virginia and Arizona to abandon their own very recent commitments to honor this central rule of the Senate. Now, Mr. President, the framers designed the Senate to require deliberation, to force cooperation, and to ensure that federal laws in our big, diverse country earn broad enough buy-in to receive the lasting consent of the governed. James Madison said the Senate should be a complicated check against improper acts of legislation. Thomas Jefferson said great innovation should not be forced on slender majorities. Senate Democrats parroted all these arguments when they were the ones benefiting from minority protection. When President Trump pressed Republicans to kill the filibuster, our Democrat colleagues cried foul. And when our Republican majority stood on principle and refused to wreck the rules, our Democratic colleagues happily used the filibuster themselves. In some cases, they flat out blocked legislation, like Senator Tim Scott's police reform bill. In many other cases, Democrats did what minority parties always do and leveraged the existence of the filibuster to influence must-pass legislation long before it got to the floor. There's so much emphasis on the most extreme bills that either party might pass with a simple majority. People forget that the Senate's 60-vote threshold is the only reason that any routine must-pass legislation is bipartisan, except during divided government. Big funding deals, appropriation bills, farm bills, highway bills, the NDAA. The Senate's 60-vote threshold backstops all of it. It's not just about controversial items, it's about everything we do. The Senate Democrats who are pressuring our colleagues from Arizona and West Virginia to reverse themselves are not just arguing for some procedural tweak, not a procedural tweak. They're arguing for a radically less stable and less consensus-driven system of government. Forget about enduring laws with broad support. Nothing in federal law would ever be settled. Does anyone really believe the American people were voting for an entirely new system of government by electing Joe Biden to the White House and a 50-50 Senate? This is a 50-50 Senate. There was no mandate to completely transform America by the American people on November 3rd. That may be what a few liberal activists want, but does anyone believe that millions of Americans thought that's what they were electing? Of course not.